server and cal licensing, we will go into the basics first because it's similar to the previous section, but there's a slight difference. You license based on a specific type of server license, and then you add the client access licenses for all the different devices and or users that need access to the server environment. So you don't have to count cores, you just need to count the amount of servers. Server and client access licensing have the same user and device cal availability, and you can obviously mix these as well. So how do you do this? You purchase a server license for each server running a server application. You purchase either user or device cals for any devices and or users that are accessing the server environments. And sometimes you need to look into if you need standard or enterprise client access license functionality. So standard cals are usually for basic functionality, and enterprise cals contain extended functionality or even additional products. And these enterprise client access licenses are additive, meaning that if you require functionality that is based in an enterprise client access license, you need to buy both standard and an enterprise cal. So you can't just buy the enterprise client access license. You need to buy both a standard and an enterprise one. Generally, with all these server and cal license models, external use does not require additional licenses as of the 2019 version. If it's different, I will note that specifically, but for the 2019 version, external use is granted through just buying the server licenses. So what can you buy in the server and cal model? And there's quite a lot of products. It's the application servers that we know: Exchange, SharePoint, Skype for Business and Project Server, Dynamics 365 for operations, Dynamics 365 on-premises, CRM, and SQL Server Standard. And there's one that I forgot to put on here, which is the Azure DevOps or Team Foundation Services product that Microsoft is still focusing quite heavily on, but that's also based on a server and cal licensing model. There's only one exception here. If you look at the different programs, Dynamics 365 for operations is only available through EA and EAS. It does also require software assurance, so that might be the reason for it. So the entry for these products is quite small in the product terms, except as described here and noted in the product-specific license terms, all server software requires client access licenses or cal equivalent licenses. And this is quite important because what is cal equivalency? And then I'm going to reference our cloud services session again in 2 weeks' time, because this is a very important concept that has arisen when Microsoft moved to cloud solutions. Cal equivalency is just that what it says. There's licenses that you can buy that grant you the same type of rights, and these are generally cloud cloud services licenses. So if I buy an Office 365 E3 license, I'm buying the access to an Exchange Online service. But within that Exchange Online service, there's also the use right to use or access an on-premises Exchange environment. So do follow that session in 2 weeks' time. It's going to be quite interesting, and we will cover a lot more around this topic. So if we go to the details of the different server types, and we start with Exchange Server, let's look at what something like this, or how you license something like this. So Exchange is different to others in the sense that it has a standard and an enterprise server edition. This means that there's two different types of server licenses that you can buy. And you buy a server license, you assign this to the server that you want to run Exchange on, and you can either choose a standard or an enterprise edition license. Generally, the difference here is that it's scalability. So if you buy a standard license, that is typically the correct version or edition to use for a smaller organization. But if you're a very large organization, typically you might need the Exchange Enterprise Server functionality. If you have licensed your servers correctly with either the standard or enterprise server, then you require the enterprise or standard and or enterprise client access licenses. And you can buy these for your devices or for your users. Again, if you need enterprise functionality, you buy a standard license and an enterprise license. The main difference here is the enterprise license offers archiving functionality and information protection capabilities. So if you're not interested in that, standard might just be enough for you, and you don't need to buy an enterprise license, enterprise CAL license. External users do not require additional licenses. SharePoint Server, it only has one server edition, so you buy a SharePoint Server license for all servers where you want to run SharePoint on, and then you license your devices or your users with standard and or enterprise CALs. The enterprise functionality of SharePoint Server CALs is mainly additional business solutions and business intelligence capabilities. Do follow the link if you need to know more around this, but that's the main difference. There are generally 3 different scenarios that you can set up with SharePoint, which have different licensing types, and it's important to go into a bit further because it depends on what the amount of license that you need to buy. So if you want to offer SharePoint as an intranet service, so you want only to use it for internal use, you license it as just described. You license the servers with the amount of server license that you need, and then you license your users and or devices. But if you want to open your environment up to the outside world, you want to allow external users to access your environment as well, you should still license all internal users with the appropriate client access licenses. External use does not require a license. Finally, there's an internet scenario where you just open up the environment for anyone to access. And this type of scenario generally doesn't require CAL, as it sees the internal and external users as the same. They're all basically external access. So in that sense, you just license the server and then you don't need any client access licenses. So Skype for Business is the third one. It is basically the same as SharePoint Server. You license your servers with the correct license, and then you assign the correct level of client access licenses to your users and or devices. You have a standard, an enterprise CAL, and an additional one here is the plus CAL. So standard CAL grants options for presence IM, peer-to-peer, voice over IP, and Skype connectivity. Enterprise CAL enables meetings with audio and video calling, desktop and application sharing, dial-in, conferencing on mobile, tablet, PC, and Mac. And the plus CAL enables you to do PSTN, dial-in, dial-out, emergency calling, and additional enterprise-grade phone features. So the plus CAL is when you want to set up Skype for Business on-premise as a as your full-on calling solution. It's often almost always a hosted solution that you then should acquire. Again, you do not require external user licenses. Project Server, this model has one server license and one type of CAL license, and you have licenses for user and device CALs. Do note that this is quite a niche product and not used a lot, but we do need to cover it here as well. When you buy Project Professional as a desktop application license, it includes a device CAL. So if you are running a project server environment and you want to have your project professional users access this, you do not require to buy additional client access licenses. If you have a lot of project standard applications within your organization, this is a very basic license, and it cannot share or access a project server environment. External users do require licenses here, but there's no external connector license. So if you have external users that need to access a project server environment, you need to buy device and or user CALs for these. Now, out of the ones handled so far, project server is the only one that is not represented in what we call the client access license suites. And we want to go into that a little bit more now, because a very important part of procuring in a enterprise agreement is that you have these standardization rights, and I already called them out for Windows operating system and for Office Professional Plus. But an additional standardization license is what Microsoft calls the client access license suites, and they have two flavors: a core client access license suite and an enterprise client access license suite. And it basically states the different states itself. The core suite is licensed by the standard editions of the CALs described earlier. The enterprise CAL suite is licensed with the additional additive enterprise client access licenses. But there's also some other differences. So the core CAL suite is a suite of client access licenses that Microsoft deems important for any user within a large organization. And it consists of the basic Windows Server CAL, so that you can access all Windows Server environments, but also the Skype, Exchange, and SharePoint standard CALs. Additionally, for some management of these devices or users, you have the Configuration Manager and Endpoint Protection Manager. In the Enterprise CAL includes all the components of the core CAL suite, but it has the additive Enterprise Client Access licenses, and it has the Windows Server RMS CAL and Advanced Threat Analytics. Please note, Advanced Threat Analytics is a security feature, and it will most likely be end of life pretty soon. So when you license in an enterprise agreement, you want to standardize on your client access licenses, you should buy either the core CAL suite or the enterprise CAL suite. When you do this in the enterprise agreement, software assurance is mandatory. And if you only need one CAL, for instance, a Windows Server CAL, you cannot buy this separately in an enterprise agreement. But you should then move to an MPSA or Select Plus agreement to just buy this client access license. Enterprise client access licenses are available standalone. So if you're buying the core CAL suite, you can just buy an Exchange Enterprise CAL standalone on top of this to release the additional functionality of that. And if we move on, the CAL suites are versionless, meaning they don't release these suites as a 2019 version or a 2016 version or whatever. But when SA coverage ends, you just get the final latest edition that was released for the different standalone products within the suite. Another side step to a cloud licensing session is that there's a Bridge CAL available, and the Bridge CAL is basically an additive license to a cloud solution to allow the rights of a CAL suite to bring together your cloud license with the core infrastructure license, for instance. So if you buy E3, you get the right to access an Exchange environment, and SharePoint environment, and a Skype for Business environment, but you lose the right for Windows Server and System Center. Well, you can buy a CAL suite Bridge that holds these rights for Windows Server, System Center. Enterprise CAL suite with active SA coverage also includes the right to Exchange Online archiving, data loss prevention, and Exchange Online protection. Well, what's important to note with these application servers is that there are certain infrastructure requirements. So in order to run an Exchange Server 2019, you need to always license the server first with Windows Server before you license your Exchange Server on top of it. The same goes for Skype for Business, but you also need SQL Server licenses. And for SharePoint, this same rule applies. And for Project Server, you even need, next to Windows Server and SQL Server, you need SharePoint Server licenses as well. If you need to move licensing because of load balancing in your server environment, it's better to acquire all your licenses with software assurance because it offers you license mobility across server farms. If you don't have this license mobility across server farms, you will have the 90-day reassignment rule. And in such a case, you are not very flexible in your load balancing. If you don't have software assurance and you want to do that load balancing, you just buy all the licenses for all the servers that your virtual environment can land on. So if we go to Dynamics, and we start with Dynamics 365 server licensing, CRM, it doesn't require server licenses, but it's still, in my opinion, a server cal licensing model because you need to buy the correct level of client access licenses. And after you have these, you can use as many server installations as you need. And you can install earlier versions of CRM server. And you can license either users or devices. Again, also here, external users do not require a license. You have 3 different license types that you need to be aware of. The sales cal, this gives you access to all the core sales capabilities, including team member rights. You have the customer services cal that gives you access to all the core customer services capabilities, and it also includes team member rights. And team member is a specific basic functionality client access license that doesn't have a specific function, but it gives you basic access rights. And why is this important to note that a sales cal or customer services cal gives you team member rights? Because if I assign a sales client access license to a user and it needs to do some basic functioning within a customer services environment, it has those rights included. So you don't have to buy an additional team member cal for that sales cal user. If we look at the operations server licensing, this is the enterprise resource planning product from Microsoft. I haven't seen it used by many organizations as an on-premise product. I have seen it used as a cloud solution. But basically, you do this in the following way. You license the server that you need with a server license. And you buy device and or user cals for your users. Software assurance is mandatory, and external users do not require licenses. You have a couple of different license types here. You have the Dynamics 365 for operations cal. You have a Dynamics 365 for operations device cal, which is the same as the operations cal, but you license point of sale devices. You have the Dynamics 365 for operations activity cal, which is limited functionality, but somewhat heavy use. So that's an in-between license between team members and operations cal. And the team members cal here is the same as with the CRM version. It gives you access to be able to do very basic specific tasks within a Dynamics environment. So when looking at the product specifics, nothing really stands out in the product terms additional to what was already discussed. Standard software assurance benefits apply. And our prediction is that server cal licensing will change rapidly towards the future. Some things that might happen or are already happening is a move to subscription licensing. The new model that Microsoft is releasing of a lot of these products will be subscription only. So it will not be a perpetual license anymore, but a subscription license that you will buy. And as such, all rights are included in that subscription, including any, I assume, any software assurance requirements. There's a huge potential for moving away from CAL licensing, but Microsoft will obviously do this without trying to cannibalize on their existing revenue. With the requirement for cloud subscription licensing with benefits to install server products. So what I mean by that is that they might be coming out with certain license type that is not a full-on cloud solution license, but it will give you the rights to use all the server editions and access rights. And finally, tied to the first point, the removal of all software assurance benefits and include these into the software subscription license. This you already see happening, and it evens out purchasing in a cloud solution provider program versus an enterprise agreement program. And as such, it will create further standardization. This is very important because the Microsoft customer agreement, the new contract that Microsoft is trying to release, might not even have software assurance rights anymore. It might just be focused on subscription licenses. And as such, they are already working towards a new mode of work where there is not a software assurance benefit needed, but it's just all included in buying a certain subscription license.